the minimum flow is not a flow that we will maintain. It is a trigger for when takes are banned. So flows can actually go below that minimum flow trigger, obviously. Certainly there is provision within, I think, TP7, which talks about the minimum flows and having to where if there is storage proceeding and they are releasing flows for to be picked up, that flow needs to be taken into account in terms of how we actually then assess what the actual flow is. But there is no compulsion to require, this is what you're saying, any storage company to release flows to augment the flow down.
Presuming one of the conditions on the RWSS is that it does provide for augmentation. One of its responsibilities is to augment flows. So my question is, what discussion occurs as to whether that is being adequately or effectively done?
So just in terms of the regulatory parts of it, and I think Liz might have a comment on the sort of commercial elements of it, but so how they manage their flow releases, so they've got a residual flow out the bottom of the dam, for example, and how they operate any releases for irrigation or flow sharing or environmental releases, that's governed by their consent, because we can't simply decide to on the day how to run that. We set that out in advance in the consent conditions, and that's how it would work. In terms of compelling them or obliging them, I guess that probably sits more in the concession deed and the business model.
So Council, my answer is going to be a little bit vague, I'm afraid, because it's been a while since I've read the concession deed agreement, and but certainly, the primary or one of the primary objectives around that from the regional council's perspective is around the environmental flows and the aspect of that. How that is actually going to be triggered, delivered, etc. I'm sorry, I'm just can't recall if it even specifies in that much detail yet quite about that. But certainly, as a principal agreement between the regional council and the regional investment company, and ultimately to the Ruataniwha Water Partnership, that's the agreement where we're going to be able to work through how that's married up.
Can I just perhaps take us back to the recommendations? As I said right at the start, all we're doing here today is making this thing operative. We've got a pending meeting with the RPC which will deal with this in more detail, and while I personally find this quite interesting, we've got another agenda to get through, so a rest of an agenda to get through. So unless there's any other specific questions about adoption or etc. today, could I take us back to the recommendations? So no further questions? I'm not trying to cut things off here, but I just think we're getting out of shape a bit. So you're happy to move, Councillor Scott? We have a seconder for the plan change adoption. I'm actually happy to second that, which I don't often do. You wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, and I really want to give my thanks to the staff for the amount of work that has gone into this and congratulate them. I know that EPA was much more spread out than we had hoped, but at the end of the day, it actually still has been one of the fastest processes of getting a plan change through. And there is, even when you move towards a consensus building around it, the public still actually have a chance to challenge that, so you still have to have a process to go through. And this has been an extremely robust process, but I really want to comment on the amazing amount of work that the staff put in over that EPA hearing. And I'm not surprised that Ms. Codlin is looking to take time out, because she has lived, breathed, eaten, slept Plan Change 6, and has driven a very robust process, and lined up a lot of very good information around it to end up with a plan that hopefully stand the test of time. No plan is perfect, as she said, and it's up to the EPA whether they got the meanings clear enough under the ordinary meeting. Some things will be challenged as the plan goes forward, but this is the first of our catchment plans, and it has already been used as another matter that to be taken into hearings on resource consents on other catchments. So I both want to congratulate but really thank the staff who really pulled out all stops and put an enormous amount of work into this. And we look forward to, getting an implementation plan because the hard work now starts.
Thank you. Second, just very briefly, also wish to convey thanks and certainly Helen Codlin has done a heck of a job. We're going to miss you greatly around the building, etc. And of course we've got a bit more of a formal chance to do that later on today, which I look forward to. But yeah, we get to say we're Plan Change 6 is operative is actually quite a big deal. And it's typically for the regional council done with a little fanfare, but it's something that needs to happen. The work's been done, getting us to here. The real work starts now. Other speakers? Much more to add? I'll put the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you and welcome, Councillor Barker. Good to see you here.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Barker is right. May I leave?
Well, I'm sure there's no correlation there, but okay, let's go to item 15, which is setting of the rates for the 15-16 financial year. Oh, you're serious? You are going? No, he did give us notice, I know. Okay, so let's hand this over to Mr. Drury. Now, yet again, this is another example of confirming previous decisions and work that's been done, correct?
Yeah, yeah, very much so, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the long-term plan's through, as you're aware, and part of that long-term plan was a funding impact statement, which was consulted on, and that sets out all the rates that the council agreed as part of the plan, specifically the first year of that plan, 15-16, and it is now a procedure or a process to formally resolve the setting of those rates, and this paper goes through the rating process. They're set. There's one payment per year, and they go out during October, and they're due in January. So that's the process we've had, and it fits in with community expectations. The resolutions in this paper have attached to it, or as part of it, the funding impact statement and the long-term plan. So I mean, nothing is lost. It's the same rates as set in the long-term plan and consulted on. These recommendations have had reports from Philip Jones of PJ and Associates. You've met Philip Jones a month or so ago. He made a couple of recommendations for tweaks in the wording of the recommendations, and we've done that. We then put it to Sainsbury Logan to have a look at the legal part of the resolution and see whether the resolution is within the legislation, and Sainsbury Logan have Lauren Hibbert is the author for that one, and that is attached as attachment 2. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I've got to say. It's the same format as every year. We need to get council to resolve to set the rates.
Right. I see Manton's just arrived. Yeah, good timing. It may or may not be a question for you, but certainly it will be probably the next paper. So, any questions in regard to that?
I guess you've got a really good formula. I was just interested the way that these rates proportioned. Here, and you will have it. So this is just totally I have off the top of my head. It just seems that Napier are paying a large proportion of Hiratonga Plains flood control, 43%. I just don't see how.
The flood and drainage scheme, the Hiratonga Plains.
Yeah, and oh, sorry.
Which page?
On the attachments.
Attachment what?
122. And also the subsidised transport, they seem to be paying a large 55% of that as well. Yep. I mean, you've got a formula, I guess, but.
Council,
How
the
do they
formula
get-
is based on land value, so, the land, in that instance, the, land value in Napier City has got to be, or the land value that is rated, for the bus service, and it's not all the land values, because it's got to be, well, I'll let Mr. Rady pick that one up, he understands more. It'll be to do with the protection works afforded by that scheme. Do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. I hadn't worked out the percentages, but they're based on capital value. There are two parts to the scheme. One is paid by those that are directly benefiting from the stop banks largely and the flood control works on the plains, and then there is an indirect area which is basically everybody within Hastings District and Napier City that pay a portion as well. And so the capital values must be fairly similar on what is coming through on that. Yeah, I'm surprised too. Yeah, it's interesting.
Further questions? Someone happy to move them? Councillor Dick, seconded Councillor Scott, you wish to speak? You good, Councillor Scott? Other speakers? Put the motion in. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Let's now go to page 135. And I'll hand that over to the group.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the financial report for the full 12 months to the end of the 30th of June 2015. Quite a bit of paper, so I'll just take you through what all this paper is about. The principal reason for this report is to provide explanations for variances from our reforecast budget, so how well did we reforecast our budget, and also variances from annual plan because that's required by legislation. And the second big reason is the draft annual plan, which is an attachment 2, which is this other big chunk of paper, plan, report. Thank you, Mr. Rady. I always call it plan somewhere or other. Draft annual report, which is this other big wad of paper, and that today Council will have a look at that with the intention of confirming that draft to proceed to audit, and it will then come back to Council. There's two attachments to the summary, the 4 or 5 sheets in the front here. Attachment 1 provides the year-end financials in a very similar format to what you normally receive throughout the year, and the focus on that report is to explain why we have varied from reforecast, and that's and it's divided up into the normal sections: operating account and balance sheet and cash flow. It's important to note that the information there and the comments to forecast are not included in the annual report, which is a proposed published document. So that's attachment 1, which we'll come back to in some detail. Attachment 2, which is the proposed document to be published in the annual report. On that first sheet there, I've got the sections, and none of those will come as a surprise. Chairman and Chief Executive's commentary, financial reporting benchmarks, which we'll go and Anthony can take you through that in some detail if you want. That's something new that's come in the last year or so on the financial reporting and prudence regulations. Service performance, about what we said we'd do and what we have done, is included in the attachment 2, and you normally go through that with some detail. The financial statement, which is half of that, that's some fairly detailed stuff, and Manton will certainly answer any questions there that you have of that detailed financial information to be published. Once you confirm the attachment 2, it'll go to audit. The audit is already we've already landed and started a little bit of it, but it'll proceed over the next couple of weeks, it'll come back to you. The proposal will be brought back to this council as an audited annual report for the September meeting, which is the 22nd of September. Oh, in fact, I err on that. It's a change in process this year. It'll go to the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee on September the 22nd. And Stephen Lucy proposes to be at that meeting of the Finance, Audit and Risk, and take them through some of the details of his audit. The annual report will then move up through the corporate and strategic, and then to council, and council is on Thursday the 24th. So it's tight, but the process is a little bit different this year. It does actually go into the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. Mr. Chairman, there's just a couple of, on pages 2, 3 and 4 of this outline report. I won't go into too much detail, but I do like to just raise some of the issues that are buried in these wads of paper, that if I don't raise them, you'll be lucky to find them perhaps. But the Regional Disaster Damage Reserve, which is a very important reserve, and I put down there on page 136 the use of that reserve, and I think Mr. Adie's presented papers in the past dealing with this reserve, as well as other issues to do with disaster insurance. This reserve, council has a policy that this reserve should be between 2.75 and 3.75. We want to keep that level up, and at the moment it's 3.4 million, so it's not proposed that there needs to be any money from the operating account transferred into to build up that reserve. I do state on that page there that council policy, and as stated in the investment policy and the long-term plan, states that 30% of that fund are to be in equities, and at the moment at the 30th of June, 32% of that fund is in equities. So we're technically in breach of that. So I did want to advise you of that. Of course, equities fluctuate. I think in June the equities strengthened, and you're aware that in the last few days they've tracked down again. So we will be under the 30% message I'm getting across there. We hover in and around the 30%. Some months we're a little bit in breach, others we're below. So I did want to.
I struggle to understand the thread of logic at the bottom of number 16. This position is being modeled, and action will be taken to decrease the value of shares if there are further premium of share prices.
Yeah, my point there, Councillor, is that if share prices went up another 20%, for instance, then the breach wouldn't be 32 versus 30. It would probably be 36 or 37%, and we would probably have to sell some of those shares or change council policy.
Well, recent days probably have sorted your problem out.
Yeah, I never felt as though I had a major problem. In fact, if we did, it would be a good problem for everybody, including this fund. I track through on revaluation of council's assets, because it is important to know when they are being revalued. Most of them are on a 3-year continuum, and that goes for infrastructure assets, hydrological assets and operational assets, and I've given there the years that they will be revalued. They haven't been revalued for this annual report. The next page, investment properties, of course, get revalued every year, and leasehold land gets revalued every year. Again, some modest increases in the values, both Napier leasehold land and Wellington leasehold properties. Napier leasehold an extra $1 million, Wellington 400,000, in and around 3%, which is a good result, and it tracks in line with what the property markets are doing. I made the point there that these capital gains on this investment are in addition to the income we receive on this property, which is Napier leasehold yielding 4.3%, which, as you're aware, most of that goes to ACC under the receivables agreement, and then the Wellington properties we do get 6.8% cash return, as well as the capital gain we've got there, so that's very pleasing. Next point I make reference to is the revaluation of the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company Limited. You'll be familiar with that. I think it was only last council meeting that you resolved to accept the recommendation to revalue that put forward by Deloitte from 177.5 to 235, which puts up the value of shares that this council holds in HBRC issued at $1 year on that valuation. I also cover forestry crops. Pleasing result this year. There has been some strengthening in the values of forestry triggered by log prices and the increase in the age of the forests. But there is a report Mr. Ady's putting together and his forestry people in that report will cover this in a lot more detail. It'll go to the corporate strategic meeting on the 23rd of September. So there'll be a lot more on forestry. That's just a comment on valuations of crops. We turn the page to 138, a little bit there on general funded operating, which we'll be spending a little bit more time on going forward. It's a pleasing result this financial year, or the financial year ending 30th of June 2015. There is a favourable variance as to the forecast. We did two forecasts during the 14-15 financial year, one in October because of some major movements in interest, and again in more detail and presented it to the April meeting in 2015. The forecast deficit was 34,000, and we've managed a surplus of 297. So it's a favourable variance of just over 300,000, which is a pleasing result. We don't normally see that, to be fair. The operations group profit on external work. I think Councillor Graham referred to how well they've done there on their, that outlined it in their report. This is just a statement that the profit on external work is an actual of 180,000. They budgeted 104, so we've certainly done better than budget, which is again pleasing. And operations group have advised that there's no requirement this year to retain a portion of that for any essential items of maintenance works, etc. And I think that reflects the new building, fully redeveloped administration building that council put in place over the last year. So Paul Aikens tells me that he's not requesting any funds to be held. Last year, you recall, I think he requested a sum of about 50,000. So as part of this recommendation, the total profit of 180,000, the recommendation will be to transfer that to operating reserves, which strengthens our operating reserve. Now, Mr. Chairman, there's recommendations on the next sheet there, but I think we probably go through the report and come back to those recommendations, because the recommendation is to adopt the annual report for audit. And at the end of this, council will either feel comfortable or not on that, and it may or may not be amended. There may be some amendments in this document going forward. Right, questions? Councillor Scott.
In paper, on page 143, under strategic plan, item 179 includes the consideration of the energy futures. During the last year, that was to be funded from the drawdown of loans from open spaces. How much of that money was spent, and what's the current status of that, if any, did we actually go into a drawdown of loans for that?
Yeah, for this financial year, June 15, we spent, I think, in the order of about 45,000. The remaining sum, which is 155, was brought forward into the long-term plan for expenditure during that plan period, which will probably be 15, 16, and I know Helen and her team are geared up to look at work on that regard.
Was that through the drawdown of loans?
Yes, it is. Yes. It's still from that fund.
And the amount that has been carried forward, is that still relying on the drawdown of loan, or has that
Yes.
been budgeted for?
It's relying on the drawdown of loan. It's the same source of funding. The open space loan, Mike's mentioning that there is money left in there. There is open space. He's putting his hand up. There is 500,000 left. And that's in the plan as well, the long-term plan. Thank you. We can come back to you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Graham.
Just on page 155, the balance sheet, that the investment in HBRC, the 12 million, that is presumably for the Ruatanipa Dam,
It's for the feasibility,
for the feasibility.
the feasibility cost
yeah,
up to
okay.
the 30th of June.
Yeah, okay. So my question is, that's going to be capitalised. Will that then become part of HBRC's equity in the dam, part of their 80 million equity, won't it?
I think the procedure is once council in November, December view the conditions precedent having been met, then that and the decision is made to invest in the dam. Then this money will then be converted to shares in HBRC, and then HBRC that's their purchase of shares in the operating company, so that'll be another transaction.
So we'll transfer that 12 million plus 67 a bit, and that will end up as the investment in council-controlled organisation, total
Yes.
80.
Yes, at the moment, council, the long-term plan has a figure of 71.5 to go as this council's investment in the Ruatanipa, and that's in the long-term plan. There is
So it's not
question of whether
67.
that's going to be 80 or not.
So that will just move up into non-current assets. In terms of that, it'll be part of our equity in HBRC and part of their shareholding in the scheme.
Further questions? So if there's no further questions on section B in your paper, we go to the attachment, excluded from the agenda, and you've got some questions specifically in here, Councillor Scott.
I've got several questions around it, and one of them is a chance to actually find some things around the report. Some of them are actually corrections I think need to be made. But I would just like, we have had a report on page 3. I think consecutively numbered. The strategic alliances, we have had a report from the Department of Conservation, but we actually haven't done anything to evaluate how effective that alliance is. Can we get some comments as to whether this is providing value to us?
I certainly can. In terms of quantifying it dollar-wise, that's difficult. But it would be fair to say that without the relationships built up through Nature Central, Cape City probably would never have got off the ground, just because of the challenges that we had to work through that. And Cape City really, as you are aware, involves about 1.5 million of investment from this council in return for a total investment in the region of about 6.2 million in terms of biodiversity outcomes. So there and the conversations between Department of Conservation at a relatively senior level and between this council, Horizons and Greater Wellington continue and continue to bear fruit, just because the doors are open, the lines of communication are open, and it would be fair to say that the whole sort of thrust going forward has been curtailed somewhat by the recent Department of Conservation restructuring, but they are largely through that and partway through that, and at this stage we're looking at moving forward from there on.
councillors are members as well. Then there should be 5, because there's councillors Hewitt, Bevan, Scott, Khan, 4, Torrell and Tanya, I think. 6.
Microphone, please.
There were 4 members accredited within that reporting period. Well, let's keep going. The
No other
other
hands up.
was that matter of clarification around on page 24. Our performance targets continue to engage on oil and gas exploration, etc. With the industry seeming to be gone very quiet here, is that simply gone into abeyance, or is it still an active part of our considerations?
It is, there's work being done from a energy futures perspective, which includes the oil and gas as well. So there have been workshops, a workshop held in the last financial year, and there are further engagement processes planned that we're being worked through at the moment.
And relating to that, Mr. Chairman, if we turn over to page 27, it states that the 28, it states the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment has been invited, but has been available. I guess it should read, but not. Yeah. And could we find out it's nearly a year? Sorry. Is she ever going to respond?
So the last time I had communication with her office was in February of this year, and she reminded me that they haven't followed up since then, so I'll get back to them. Thank you.
The state of the current industry is globally. I think it's helpful for us to get up to date with that.
Anything further, Councillor Scott?
Could you clarify on page 42 the damage that was done to the beach crest at West Shore that says 1 localised? Whereabouts was that? Oh, right down there. Okay. Yep. Mr. Chairman, really, this is a comment on page 45 on the number of meetings being held on the farm environmental plans. Just some information from staff about how much capability is there out there in the industry to provide on this. Are we finding that it is got a depth to it? That's a lot of meetings. 30 meetings is showing a lot of progress, so it's quality and capability.
I can comment on that. The challenge for us is the capacity of the farm planning practitioners throughout the country to meet demand, and it's not just a Hawke's Bay issue, it's a national issue. We have been engaged in workshops and discussions with the primary sector and MPI to explore ways forward with this. MPI fortunately are taking quite a bit of leadership in acknowledging or recognising the problem. They're looking for solutions, be it industry training or schemes to get people into it, helping regions establish processes and practices to make the systems or the management of farm plans efficient, it's going to be a challenge for us in the future in terms of having sufficient suitable practitioners that we're comfortable with, that we would happily accept and bank, if you like, a farm plan. But what I'm stressing to our staff and to others is that there's no absolute blind panic to deliver this. We have some triggers to around consenting and policy positions, dates in the future that will provide us with some challenges, but that it's not a showstopper in terms of we know we're not going to be able to deliver them all, because we just simply don't have enough people to write them. Even if we all got everybody in the building now and started doing it, we just don't have enough people to write them all. But that what we're looking to do is say, well, pragmatically then, how do we set people up to get them in the gate in terms of a consent? If they're triggered, they can't get a farm plan simply because they can't get anybody to write it. We cookie cut a consent for them and get them into the consenting process in a cheap and efficient way to allow them to carry on, and then pick up the balance at the end. And added to that is we're taking an approach of, if you like, triaging. We're going to our priority subcatchments where we know we have the issues with water quality at the moment, and saying that's where we want to see the farm planning happen ahead of the ones where it's not so pressing. So there's a number of strategies we're bringing to bear, but we know that the farm planning practitioners just don't exist. And like I say, it's not a Hawke's Bay issue, it's a New Zealand issue.
Page, Mr. Chairman, we get a lot of snackers, people who are using a Snickers bar. But here's a really good news story. Can we use this perhaps when we launch the biodiversity strategy? Here's a huge amount of lots of work being done out there with community. It gets a one-liner in our annual report. But there's something really worth celebrating in this. And perhaps we should look at highlighting some of these when we do the launch the strategy.
Right.
And perhaps on page 62, the navigational aid, did the navigational aid fail or the contractor or both? The Parari navigational aid was installed but failed, so new aid by a new installer. What were the problems around that? And who picked up the responsibility for the funding of it?
So we fund them.
Yeah. We fund failed ones.
I'm not sure in terms of where the liability sits for the failure and what recoveries we're seeking around that. But yeah, we are responsible for installing and maintaining them. So if the contractor didn't put them in properly, I would imagine that it's at his or her cost, but I can find that out and come back to you.